All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. My name is Jessica Kinsley, Deputy Director of Business and Regulatory Affairs at Ohio EPA, and I'll be moderating the Erring on the Side of Caution, Common Facility Maintenance Issues and How to Address Them session. Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Conference has 24 sessions over 2 weeks. We are in week 2 of the conference, and this is the second focusing on air pollution control today. Registration information and a conference agenda are located on the Ohio EPA's conference webpage. We hope you can join us for additional conference sessions. Please remember, it is never too late to sign up for the next conference session, and all sessions are being recorded for you to view later. We would like to direct your attention to one of our environmental fun facts. Before you light it, know Ohio EPA's open burning regulations. Open burning is any set outdoor fire that does not vent to a chimney or stack. The open burning allowed depends on the type of the type of fire and location, inside or outside city limits. It is never allowable to open burn garbage in Ohio. A campfire for cooking, warmth, or pleasure is allowed without notification to Ohio EPA if you burn only clean, dry, seasoned firewood. The fire is no larger than 2 feet high by 3 feet wide, and the fire is not used for waste disposal. You can scan the QR code on this slide to learn more about Ohio's open burning regulations. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our presenters, Jeff Gertis and Elise Wineland of our Division of Air Pollution Control. Jeff is currently the Environmental Supervisor of the Asbestos Program in DAPC's Central Office. He has been in this position since 2019. Prior to that, Jeff worked at the Ohio Department of Health in the asbestos, lead, and radon programs for 14 years. He has been involved in asbestos and other environmental-related work since 1996. Elise is an Environmental Specialist 3 for DAPC in their Northwest District Office. Her current duties include reviewing permits, providing technical guidance to the staff and regulated community, and assisting in developing and implementing technical programs within the Northwest District Office, including enforcement, new source review, and small business assistance. Elise started as a summer intern and has been with Ohio EPA since 2010. And with that, Jeff, you can take it away.
All right. Thank you, Jessica. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Good morning, everyone. As Jessica said, I am Jeff Gertis, the supervisor of the asbestos program here in the Division of Air Pollution Control at the Ohio EPA Central Office. Today, Elise and I will talk a little bit about asbestos, scheduled maintenance bypass requests, odors, and dust. I will start off talking about asbestos and touch on some of the requirements that you may need to be aware of as an owner of a facility. And then later you will hear from Elise regarding the rest of the topics. We have 2 chapters that cover asbestos. The first is Ohio Administrative Code 3745-20, which is the emission control rules. This covers demolition, renovation, asbestos abatement, wet methods, proper packaging and disposal of the asbestos debris. And we also have notification requirements under this. The other chapter is Ohio Administrative Code 3745-22, which is our asbestos licensing and certification rules. This covers asbestos contractor licensing, asbestos certification of individuals, asbestos abatement training course approvals, and it also has notification requirements. We'll get into all this a little more here shortly. All right, we're going to start right off here with a poll. And the question is, has a thorough asbestos building inspection ever been performed in your facility? Yes or no?
All right, the poll is now open, so you all should be able to make a selection. All right, it looks like some votes are still coming in, so we'll give it about another minute. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the results. And actually, it looks like we're pretty split, 50-50.
All right. Well, thank you, Jessica. That I wasn't expecting the answer to be exactly 50-50, but looks like many of you do know what kind of type of asbestos-containing materials are in your facility, and some of you do not. Hopefully, that the ones that do not know, hopefully this presentation will help guide you through the process and guide you through your future renovations. Uh-oh. Lost my place. Sorry. All right. As a facility, what are your obligations? Prior to renovation or demolition, you are required to have a thorough asbestos building inspection performed. To find out what asbestos-containing materials you may be dealing with. This thorough asbestos inspection must be performed by an Ohio EPA certified asbestos hazard evaluation. The inspection will identify the locations of those asbestos-containing materials and will also include quantities and conditions of those materials. Sorry, I was on the wrong page there. There must be a notification submitted to Ohio EPA for the demolition or renovation work that includes asbestos abatement. Contractors are required to follow very specific work practices on how to properly remove, package, and dispose of asbestos-containing materials. And asbestos work is required to be performed by properly trained and Ohio EPA certified individuals and licensed asbestos contractors. We're going to talk a little more about some of these coming up. All right, facility. Let's talk about the emissions control rules first. A facility is defined as an institutional, commercial, public, industrial, or residential structure, installation, or building. Any installation or building that was previously subject to this rule due to its prior use or function is not excluded regardless of its current use or function. So the second part of this is important here. There are some instances that residential structures can be exempt from Ohio EPA asbestos rules. You have to look at the entire history of the building. If it was never used as a business, or if it was ever used as a business, it will never lose that designation and therefore will always apply to the asbestos rules. What is friable asbestos-containing material or regulated asbestos-containing material? We also call that RACM. What does a material have to consist of to fall under this definition? First off, it is a material that contains more than 1% asbestos. When that material is dry, it can be crumbled, pulverized, or reduced to powder by hand pressure. And then the last one here addresses Category 1 and Category 2 non-friable materials. Category 1 non-friable materials include roofing, flooring, gasketing, and packings. Category 2 non-friable materials include all other non-friable materials. A couple of examples are asbestos, cement board products, and caulking around windows and doors. Any Category 1 or Category 2 non-friable asbestos-containing material that becomes damaged from either deterioration or attempts at abatement or removal resulting in small fragments the size of 4 square inches or less shall also be considered friable or RACM. All right, demolition and renovation. What is considered a demolition versus what is considered a renovation? Demolition is to remove or wreck any load-supporting structural members or related operation. Also includes burning of a facility. Sometimes a fire department will burn a structure for fire training. When this happens, you are required to have all the asbestos removed prior to the burn. In renovation, this is where one alters the facility in any other way. That includes removing the asbestos as well. All right, now that we have a few of the key definitions out of the way, what do we need to do? I've already touched on a few of these. The first thing to do is determine if a renovation or demolition is going to occur at your regulated facility. Then you have to have a thorough asbestos inspection performed. This one's very important, maybe the most important thing we do in this entire process. This has to be done by an Ohio EPA certified asbestos hazard evaluation specialist. Many times when problems are encountered on a project site, it falls back on a poor building inspection that was done or a lack of one being performed at all. This can lead to change orders and delays in the project schedule, and we all know that that can mean additional costs. You have to submit a notification. We'll talk a little bit more about notifications here in a minute. You have to remove that regulated asbestos-containing material prior to any disturbance. So prior to any renovation or demolition activity occurring, you have to remove that regulated asbestos. You have to follow specific work practices. You're required to keep it wet. There are proper handling, packaging, and labeling requirements. And you have to dispose of all RACM at an approved active waste, asbestos waste disposal site. Let's talk a little bit about the licensing and certification rules and when do they apply. These were revised in January of 2021. An abatement activity definition is an important one for many facilities that perform small maintenance projects on occasion in-house that disturb small amounts of asbestos. You now have to be certified individually by the Ohio EPA as an asbestos worker or abatement specialist to perform an abatement activity. This includes any removal, renovation, enclosure, repair, encapsulation, or operations and maintenance of greater than 3 linear or 3 square feet of friable asbestos-containing material. So again, if you're removing more than 3 feet of friable asbestos-containing material, then you must be certified by Ohio EPA. An abatement project, this is when removal of 50 linear feet or greater than 50 linear feet or greater than 50 square feet of friable asbestos-containing material or rackham occurs. This is the point where notification and use of a licensed asbestos abatement contractor is now required. And then the other thing that was changed that could affect a facility is we exempted removal or repair of pipeline asphaltic wrap, roof flashings, and build-up roofing if the work is performed in compliance with OSHA and US EPA requirements. This exemption is only for licensing and certification requirements. It does not exempt you from following the emission control rules or US EPA and OSHA. All right, what other things do the licensing and certification rules cover? We have abatement and training course notification requirements. We have 5 different types of individual certifications that we issue: asbestos workers, abatement specialists, evaluation specialists, project designers, and air monitoring technicians. We also license asbestos abatement contractors. We issue training course approvals. And the last thing is we require that the certified individuals and licensed asbestos contractors follow Ohio EPA, US EPA, and OSHA's rules and regulations. All right, let's talk a little bit about OSHA. How does OSHA play into the asbestos rules? OSHA breaks work down into 4 classes of work: Class 1, Class 2, Class 3, and Class 4. Depending on the class of work being performed depends on the work practices and worker protection requirements one has to follow. Some examples of this include setting up a full negative pressure containment or just using a glove bag for removal. Do I need a 3-stage decontamination unit or HEPA vacuums to perform this type of work? Then we have employee protection. OSHA also will determine what types of respirators the employees are required to use and also require use of protective work suits. They have a medical monitoring program. Employees are required to have annual asbestos physical and fit testing of a respirator. This will determine if the worker is medically qualified to wear a respirator. They are required to have this documentation on the project site when asbestos work is being performed. They also have a training requirement. Depending on the type of asbestos work being performed, OSHA will determine the amount of training that is required. This includes anywhere from 2 hours to 40 hours initially and annual refresher training after that. And I just wanted to make you aware of the Class 3 and Class 4 work requirements. Briefly here, training requirements. Class 3 work is operation and maintenance activities, and Class 4 work is only 2-hour asbestos awareness training for custodial maintenance staff. The key takeaway here is that even small amounts of asbestos disturbance requires some form of training. And then here at the bottom are our 2 OSHA asbestos standards that we deal with most of the time. 29 CFR 1926.1101 is the asbestos construction standard, and then 1910.134 is the respiratory protection standard that they are required to follow. All right, we've got another poll. The question: do you have asbestos-containing materials in your facility? Yes, no, or I have no clue.
All right, you should now all see the poll on your screen. So please take a moment and make your selection. All right, results are still coming in. If you haven't already, please make your selection. We'll close the poll here in a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now and share the results. It looks like we're pretty close there, but the majority says yes.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Well, it looks like that many of you are aware of what you're dealing with in your facility. That definitely will help when you have any type of renovation activity or demolition activity coming up. For those of you that have no clue, just be aware there are a lot of requirements for asbestos-related work out there. So, all right, let's touch a little bit on notification requirements. When do I have to notify the Ohio EPA? All demolitions require a notification. All right. So any renovations and abatement, when we are above the thresholds, we are required to submit a notification. Now, the first one here I threw in here does not require a notification. However, I thought it was important just to bring it up again. So 3 square feet, greater than 3 square feet or greater than 3 linear feet of friable asbestos requires Ohio EPA individual certification only. No notification at this point. But the rest of the stuff we're going to touch on here does require notification. So an abatement project is where you hit the 50-50 mark, so greater than 50 square feet or 50 linear feet of removal of friable asbestos containing material. You're required to submit an abatement notification. When you reach the greater than equal to 260 linear feet on pipes, greater than equal to 160 square feet on other facility components, or greater than or equal to 35 cubic feet of other facility components, such as a debris pile where the quantities cannot be measured. Those also require that kicks in the emission control rule requirements and for abatement, and that requires notification as well. What goes into a notification? You have to notify the Ohio EPA at a minimum of 10 working days prior to the project starting. And those count as Monday through Friday. It includes the owner information, start and end dates, asbestos and demolition contractor information, what materials that you will actually be removing, quantities, and some specific work practice methods that you will be using as well. Will you be using wet methods? All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about different types of notifications. So, one, as a facility owner, you may use an annual notification. Many large industrial facilities use this. It's a notification that includes non-scheduled operations that individually are exempt from this chapter, But when you combine the total amounts, it now will exceed the thresholds of 160 square feet, 260 linear feet, or 35 cubic feet of RACM from those facility components during a calendar year. This type of notification runs from January 1st to December 31st of the calendar year. So every year, if you're using this type of notification in your facility, you will have to submit a new one for. So when you know that throughout the year you have several small maintenance repairs that involve asbestos, for example, you just know that you're going to have pipe leaks or valve leaks that have asbestos insulation on them, or you may have a boiler go down or something that gets damaged. Each of these repairs may only disturb a very small amount of asbestos, maybe less than 50 feet, for example, of friable asbestos. But when you add them all together throughout the year, it will now exceed those 160, 260, 35 threshold numbers. So that's the purpose of the annual notification. And all of our notifications that I'm going to talk about here, the forms and the instructions are all located on our asbestos website. We have a e-business center, which you can submit all those notifications through the business center at the Ohio EPA website as well. Emergency, one of the last types of notifications that I wanted to talk about, and that is the emergency renovation and emergency abatement notification. This results from a sudden, unexpected event that is not planned. It includes operations necessitated by non-routine failures of equipment or by actions of fire and emergency medical personnel. It will waive the 10-day wait requirement for the notification, so we need to get that cleaned up today. We can't wait. Notify as soon as possible, but no later than the following working day after commencing the emergency. You have to include the date and hour that the emergency occurred, a description of the sudden unexpected event, and an explanation of how the event caused an unsafe condition or would cause equipment damage or would pose an unreasonable financial burden if not immediately corrected. And usually we would want a letter from an asbestos hazard evaluation specialist explaining why this is an emergency, and they would typically just summarize all that stuff in the scenario that may be involved. So. All right, well, this is just a list of building materials that could contain asbestos in your facility. Asbestos has been identified in over 3,000 different building materials. So just a few examples. I'm not going to go through the whole list here. Cement board related materials can be in pipes, siding, floor tile, different types of floor tile, linoleum, plasters, acoustical or decorative plasters, paints, textured paints. A lot of your different laboratory related items can have asbestos in it. Gloves, for example, laboratory hoods and tabletops. All kinds of mechanical, anything mechanical insulation related, whether it's on pipes or a boiler or a duct, that can all have asbestos in it. Your roofing materials can have asbestos in it. Fire doors is another one. Drywall, joint compound. So just to name a few of them. I have a few pictures to throw out, giving a few examples. Here's fireproofing. They apply this to the beams and the steel decking. Sometimes it's the beams only. Sometimes they spray it over everything. It's costly and very challenging to remove. It's difficult to get that clean. That stuff, when they blow that on, tends to spray everywhere. So a lot of little nooks and crannies to try to get that removed on an abatement project. Here are two examples of cement board products. Many people call this transite. Perforated cement board. The one on the left is perforated cement board or pegboard. The other picture here is a cooling tower, and those panels on the cooling tower will sometimes be asbestos. It's also used in pipes, as I mentioned there a minute ago, laboratory tabletops, fume hoods, electrical panels, chalkboards. So wide range of usage for transite or cement board products. Pipe insulation and boiler HVAC equipment. Pretty much anything mechanical related can have the potential to contain asbestos. The pipe insulation we see here on the left is corrugated paper. There's also versions of layered paper out there. Sometimes the line, the pipe straight run will be fiberglass, and the elbows, mudded fittings, and pipe joints and valves will be mudded with an insulating cement that can contain asbestos. So even your newer fiberglass lines can have a sealant used that can contain asbestos, and I have also seen there's a paper layer underneath that fiberglass that sometimes can contain asbestos. So be aware, if you have a lot of fiberglass insulation, that there still may be asbestos-related materials in some of those. The boilers, they can also contain asbestos-containing gaskets, chinking. So here you have, breaching headers that can contain asbestos on your boilers. Here's a shot of a boiler that is not in very good condition at all. This is not what you want your boiler to look like. There's likely a high asbestos exposure going on in this room, so you would want to get that addressed immediately and get that cleaned up. Plaster, drywall, and joint compound. In the plaster, the asbestos is usually found in the base coat layer. In the drywall and joint compound, the asbestos layer is usually in the joint compound. That's the material, the mud that many refer to, that covers the seams and nail heads. Floor tile. 9 by 9 inch floor tile is almost always asbestos containing. Don't forget about the mastic or the adhesive that adheres the tile to the floor. That can also be asbestos containing. The 12 inch by 12 inch floor tile, it can also be asbestos containing, but it is not as common as the 9 by 9 size. Here's a couple different abatement methods. On the left, the glove bag of pipe insulation. They wrap that bag, seal it to the pipe, remove all the insulation inside that sealed bag, clean it, wash it all down and clean it, and then remove the bag once completed. And then on the right is a mini containment. They're used when there's a small area of asbestos to be removed. You can see they've got a AFD or air filtration device there that creates a negative pressure enclosure that draws air through the work area through a HEPA filter that filters out the asbestos, blows clean air out the back. They've got a water sprayer in there. They have a decontamination unit. It's usually big enough for 2 workers to occupy. Here's a larger scale abatement project. You can see all the windows are covered and sealed with plastic. They actually made the dumpster part of their work area where they will directly load all the asbestos waste into the dumpster and then seal it all up in one large container when full. When this is done properly, it can be more cost effective by saving time on supplies and man hours. They don't have to handle all those individual bags, which can be time consuming and costly on supplies. Here's a map. It's on our website. Shows all of our district offices and local air agency contacts. This is located. You go to the Ohio EPA website and you can link to the asbestos program, and we do have it there for everybody. We've also got individual contact names listed as well. So it depends on the county that you are located in as to who you may reach out to. All right, wrapping things up. Here are some important links and our contact info. Just note the one in the middle there, the e-business center, kind of mentioned it earlier, but that's where you can go do business with the Ohio EPA. You can submit notifications and apply for all of your asbestos certifications and licensing needs there. Also on our website, we have a listing, which I didn't put up here, the link to that, but you can get to it through our asbestos website. We have a listing of all of our certified individuals and licensed contractors, as well as a listing of the demolition and abatement project notifications and the notifications for upcoming training courses if you need to get trained up. So that's all I have. I would like to thank you all for having me. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to the program or any of the district offices or local air agency asbestos representatives. I will now hand this off to Elise to cover the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, I am Elise Wineland, and I will be discussing scheduled maintenance bypass requests and concerns and controls with odors and dust associated with those maintenance requests. But first, let's jump in with the poll question. Poll question. Does your facility have any upcoming maintenance projects on control equipment? Yes, no, or do you have enough maintenance projects at home to complete?
All right, our poll is now open, so please take a moment and make your selection. All right, it looks like we're still getting some folks voting, so we'll give it about another minute. All right, it looks like the majority of folks have responded, so I'm going to go ahead and close our poll now and share the results. And it looks like for the majority, no, you do not have any upcoming maintenance projects on control equipment planned.
Well, that's a good thing. That means that you guys are keeping up with maintenance on your control equipment. So that is always a good thing that the control equipment is working correctly. If you do end up needing to submit a scheduled maintenance bypass request, I'm going to talk about the process for doing that. So we often get the question, my permit says I have to operate control equipment at all times. So what do I do if I need to do maintenance on this control equipment? So our first question we would ask is, can this be shut down while the unit is shut down, or does the work need to be performed while the unit is online? So we recognize that there are times that you might need to shut down some control equipment, but your source also needs to be operating. So this is our process for doing that. The purpose of this process is to make sure to prevent any type of malfunctions. So we want to make sure that you're keeping up with your control equipment. That way we don't have a problem with the malfunction, and then it ultimately presents higher emissions or other additional concerns. So these rules are found in OAC Rule 3745-16, specifically Part A. The rule requires that you submit the request at least 2 weeks before any type of scheduled maintenance. So this gives us time to look over the request and ask for any additional information if we need it. Please remember that this is for preventative maintenance type activities. So if your control equipment is already kind of going down, you need to take it offline immediately, and there's some type of malfunction that's inevitable or that would occur within 2 weeks, this is not really the request that you need to be submitting. You need to be following the malfunction requirements under 1506B. There are 2 ways to submit your request. You can do that electronically through Air Services, and Jeff had mentioned Air Services. So if you do not have an account and you would like one, you can sign up for one through our e-business portal. It's very easy. We have a lot of references out there for you to do that. So if you would prefer to submit a hard copy, you can do that by submitting it to the appropriate district office or local air agency. And then here's the link for that. A lot of times it's just easiest if you email a copy of the request to your contact, but we do accept it through hard copies through the mail. It just may take a little longer to process them depending on what time we get them in. What needs to be included in this request? The first item that needs to be included is the source identification. So what is the process that you're controlling? Is it some type of a melting furnace, a chemical manufacturing process, a coating operation? And then what type of control equipment is being taken offline? Is it a baghouse, a cyclone, an SCR, or an RTO? Are a couple of examples. It also really helps if you include the emissions unit ID that's listed in your permit. It helps make the processing it a lot easier. The second item that needs to be included is how long you expect this equipment to be offline. Remember to account for any type of startups and shutdowns or, cool downs, warm up periods that may be needed. What do you expect the control emissions to be, the uncontrolled emissions to be? So obviously if you're taking control offline, there are going to be an additional emissions. We just need to know the nature, what type of emissions those will be, and then how much you expect those emissions to be. Measures taken to minimize downtime. What can you do to limit that? Can you do some of the prep work while the unit is online? Can you utilize extra labor? Those are a couple of examples that you could use. Why is a shutdown impractical? We've seen some various reasons. Is it a glass melting furnace that would have to be refractored? Do other processes at the facility depend on this process continuing to operate? Will it create more emissions if you shut down the facility? I'm sorry, I missed. And then finally, what are the interim controls that you can use? So we'll talk about a couple ideas of those when we talk about odor and dust. So these are really important that you include all of this information because that helps us determine what can and can't be approved. You'll submit the request, we'll review the information, and then you'll receive the approval letter. So what comes next after that? Your approval letter will outline all of this, but the first thing that needs to be done when the maintenance begins is to notify Ohio EPA. It's always a good idea to kind of put in the request the tentative date that you plan to do that. That way we know. But you can notify us once the actual maintenance starts by calling or emailing your point of contact. And that information, if you don't know who your contact is, will be listed in the approval letter. This notification is useful for us. A lot of times, if a concerned citizen is driving by and notices something different from your facility, they may call in with questions or concerns. So this will help us say, hey, we know what's going on, we're aware of the problem, and kind of be able to allay any concerns. In that same vein, we'd also like to know once the maintenance is completed. That way, in the notification, you have to provide the amount of time you expect that to be taken offline, the control equipment to be taken offline. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter. So by communicating this, it really helps, communicating any potential changes. That way we can proactively address any concerns rather than have to react to concerns, and we can collaborate and try to figure out what needs to be done. Finally, you need to make sure to identify the maintenance and approval request on any type of deviation reports and emission reports. So if you have an annual permit evaluation report, make sure to include that. And then make sure you're accounting for those emissions in your blue cards if you fill those out. Sometimes these maintenance activities do not always go as planned, so they can create potential concerns, and that can become an air pollution nuisance. So an air pollution nuisance is the emission or escape into the open air from any source or sources whatsoever of smoke, ashes, dust, dirt, grime, acids, fumes, gases, vapors, or any other substances or combinations of substances in such manner or in such amounts as to endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the public or cause of unreasonable injury or damage to property. So that's a lot to say. Basically, what our Ohio EPA's expectation is that your maintenance activities that you perform at your facility do not create any problems or concerns, or which would lead to a nuisance. So there are a lot of different topics we can discuss with this. So I'm going to focus a few more minutes on odors and dust. They're the pretty common nuisance issues that we see. So again, here's another definition, an odor. What is an odor? It is the property of substance that activates the sense of smell. Our most common odors that we see are from solvents or aromatic compounds. You'll find those in paints, varnishes, adhesives, at dry cleaning facilities, in the petroleum industry. Sulfur compounds are found in petroleum products, sewage and waste a lot of times, decaying food or other organic matter. So a lot of times we'll have sulfur smells from landfills. Ammonia or other nitrogen compounds. This can be from animal waste or rendering processing facilities, decaying food or organic matter again, as well as fertilizer plants. Just remember that not all odors are harmful. For example, mulching in wastewater facilities may sound bad. They're actually helping the environment, and the odors are not harmful. And similarly, pleasant smells can be considered a nuisance. So you go by that bakery every day, it may the odor from there may be considered a nuisance. So what can you do to prevent odors when you're doing maintenance? A lot of processes, if you're doing a normal process, it will have controls online, such as an RTO or a scrubber. So when you have to take those offline, or even if you don't have control, the main way to control odors is to prevent them. So a couple ideas, if you do have control equipment, are there temporary operational changes that you can do? Can you restrict your operating times to a time, maybe if you're by a school, when parents aren't coming in and dropping off children, or children aren't in school? Online maintenance practices, can you try to do as much work with the control equipment online? Can you modify the process or chemical formulations? Can you avoid any strong solvents that have a particularly strong odor? Could you maybe switch to a water-based coating? If you're doing some maintenance that may cause odors, but do not have control equipment, is there a way for you to bring in a temporary piece of control equipment? Ohio EPA regulates, now we'll talk about dust. Ohio EPA does regulate particulate emissions. That's found in Chapter 3745-17 of the Ohio Administrative Code. So we regulate both particulate emissions from stacks as well as the fugitive emissions, which most people consider dust. Fugitive dust means particulate matter which is emitted from any source by means other than a stack. So first off, let me acknowledge that Ohio EPA recognizes no dust is unrealistic. Be it if you're at a facility or doing maintenance, we recognize that. With that being said, we do have requirements for fugitive dust, and those are found in Chapter 3745-17-08 rules. They only apply to certain areas of the state, mainly areas that are pretty densely populated, and those particular areas are found in Appendix 8 of the rule. There are a few operations that are exempt from those portions of the rule. I won't name them all, but some of them are grain elevators, publicly owned roadways, provided that the dust is not from materials due to industrial, commercial, or construction activities, tilling and wind erosion from farmlands, and then residential activities. Ohio EPA cannot regulate residential activities. Ohio EPA has, in our Chapter 17 rules, in Rule 1708, we do have something called Reasonably Available Control Measures, or RACM, which are the requirements that help regulate fugitive dust. So asbestos has a RACM, as well as the rest of the air division. So one of the first things involved in that is that we do limit the amount of visible emissions that you can emit during times of activity. We also want you to and expect you to minimize or eliminate any dust. Use other suitable chemicals or dust suppressants if possible. Those also include common sense standards, which means, if you're doing something that has a lot of dust, try to use a water lance so that it can suppress some of the dust versus an air lance. Make sure there are covers on the trucks. Make sure any sawing and grinding and cutting operations can be done under hoods or other capture systems while possible. While maintenance may be intermittent and less frequent than routine operations, you do still need to make sure to employ these reasonably available control measures, or RACM. Here's just a couple of quick examples for us on concerns with controls. So here we have a potential crushing and screening operation. On the right here, you'll see a baghouse that could be offline. On the left here is some transferring and conveying operations, and inside the building are some crushing and screening operations. So obviously we are not going to accept that amount of dust. That the amount of dust coming from the facility is a bit excessive. So if the baghouse controlling it isn't online, what should the facility be doing? Well, first thing is, are any doors open? Unnecessary doors or windows, can they be shut? When the material is being transferred and conveyed into the building, the drop heights, can the drop heights be lowered in any type of way? Can you, again, this is where we would ask that you utilize an extra manpower on the maintenance activities so that we can get the baghouse back online quicker. Dusty roads from vehicles entering and exiting the property. It's one of the most common complaints we get, are dusty roads. Some of the work practices that you can follow, simply lowering the speed limit. You can use a water truck or a street sweeper, maybe pave the road or apply some other type of dust suppressant. So kind of in summary, Ohio EPA does not have any expectation of zero dust or odors. We recognize that is unrealistic, especially when maintenance activities are being performed. If you experience any type of problem during any maintenance activities, give us a call so we can help determine a path forward and collaborate on that. If you notice any excessive dust or strong odors, also communicate those concerns. And we have a lot of resources out there. You can find them on our website. It's always great to know who your county contact is. And if you have any questions, you can give them a call. So I will now turn it back over to Jessica. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Jeff and Elise, for your great presentations. Unfortunately, it looks like we have run out of time for questions as a part of the presentation, but I do encourage you to chat in any questions you may have in the Q&A pane, and someone from our team will reach out to you via email following today's session. Thank you, everyone, for attending this 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference session. Before we end the session today, we would like to point your attention to another one of today's environmental fun facts. On this slide, we are highlighting Ohio EPA's Office of Compliance Assistance and Pollution Prevention Toll-Free Compliance Assistance Hotline. This hotline is staffed from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, whenever Ohio EPA's offices are open. We also have a live chat feature available during these same hours. Both services are a great way to reach out to us for answers on your environmental regulation and permitting questions. You can scan the QR code on this slide to get more information about our hotline and chat feature. Ohio EPA hosts a series of webinars throughout the year on a variety of environmental topics. This slide provides information on how to register for the upcoming webinars, where to find recordings of previous webinars, and how to sign up to receive notifications of upcoming webinars through the Ohio EPA Customer Support Center. And with that, we will end this session of Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. We hope you can join us for other conference sessions. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.